Alright guys, I wanted to make a quick video just thinking about some random cars again. This video I wanted to make on just some like random, I would classify as cool cars, because I think they're just that not traditional what you expect from some of the cars. These are cars that I would say are often overlooked. I think that they're a neat car in their own right, but I think unfortunately, because of their other, what should I say, like trim levels, it kind of it unfortunately kind of took away from these special cars, and I think that they unfortunately are gonna die. They're going to be no longer with us sooner than later because of that. I think just because people are overlooking them. So to get into it pretty quickly here, the first one is the Nissan Altima. So Nissan made the Altima in, I guess it's technically is it the second generation Altima? Neat story is that the Altima was technically, originally it was the Stanza, I believe. I believe that was what the Altima kind of turned in, or the Stanza turned into from the, it ended in the early 90s. I want to say it was like 91, 92 when it ended. And then the, the first generation Altima that looked like the Infiniti J30, that kind of like jelly bean look. But I believe, no, so this would be the third generation Altima. The second generation Altima was not very good looking. But the third generation Altima, they obviously had the 4-cylinder and the 3.5 liter V6 that's was the J, what was it, not the J series, I'm a Honda guy, I'm thinking J series, the VQ engine that was available in all forms, in like the Murano, the van, the 350Z, the Maxima. So it was just another version of that engine. They kind of detuned it, and so instead of making, I think it was more of like the 283 horsepower from the 350Z. It made more of like, in this version, it was the Altima SER. So I think the Altima SER made 265 horsepower. So it was a little bit detuned. It was a little less horsepower than the Maxima of the time, which Maxima actually had a pretty cool Maxima as well. But yeah, so it was just kind of a detuned 350Z engine that they kind of used. Same thing with what Honda did with the J series V6s. So yeah, so this SER was actually a very cool car in that it came with a manual transmission. It came with a manual 6-speed transmission. It did not come with limited slip. So the 2002 and 2003 Maximas were actually a very special edition as well. They came with a 6-speed limited slip. It was a helical limited slip. If you got the SE model, you could get the 6-speed manual transmission with the helical limited slip. But they also had this Altima, which was a pretty cool car. I mean, I actually wouldn't mind one. I mean, is it a car that I'm going to go out and buy and fix up? I mean, if I wasn't such a car enthusiast of a lot of different cars, and I didn't own as many cars as I did, I mean, honestly, I could see myself, just buying one, building it, like mostly restoring it, and then enjoying it for a little bit, and then sell it. So I mean, I definitely wouldn't mind restoring one, at least keep it from being crushed. But yeah, so the SER was a really cool car. It was reliable in that most of the SEs, the 6-cylinders, they suffered from the transmissions failing, the automatic transmissions failing. So Kind of same thing about the same vintage of Hondas. You know, the V6 Hondas were, particularly the Honda Accords. I mean, I guess a lot of their V6s. I mean, I know the Odyssey as well. The transmissions were dying, but yeah. So yeah, it was the VQ engine. Reliable? No. But the manual transmission at least made that car a little bit more reliable. In that was one less thing to worry about failing, and the neat thing about it is, it has so much potential. It's basically got the same potential as the 350Z engine. So, yeah, I mean, you can actually. I did this research a while ago. It's been at least a year or two. I think probably closer to 2 years since I did the research on it. But yeah, I mean, you could actually put in a newer Maxima engine. Same it's 3.5 liter, but it was actually much more impressive engine, and you could get even more power. In fact, those ones responded to modifications even better. It was kind of like that next generation. I guess it was maybe 2004. It started in 2004. It basically was just kind of like the HR 350Z engine, where it's the better 3.5 liter version of that engine. So that's kind of what the that 2004 to like 2008 generation Maxima, that car got that. So it was definitely a better engine. So yeah, you could swap it in fairly easily. So you could kind of fix the reliability issues. So yeah, I mean, other than that, I mean, it's a cool car. I really like it. I'm a huge Honda guy, so I like the J series, but I think that VQ engine's actually better as far as if you're looking to get maximum horsepower out of it. I mean, they're at least neck and neck. So yeah, I mean, that would be kind of a car that I would love to basically restore it and do what my favorite thing is I always call it OE plus, where I like to stay in the same family for chassis and engine, so you can kind of keep the same family of engine and Nissan in there and get even more power out of it and kind of be a sleeper. They came in some cool colors. I mean, particularly the black and the red, and you can get them for pretty dirt cheap. I've seen a lot of them. Unfortunately, a lot of them aren't taken care of, but yeah, you can get those cars for pretty cheap. I think I saw one time, 6-speed. It wasn't running for $1,000, and most of the ones that I see are around $3,000. So yeah, those cars are pretty cool. I will say I would actually love to mess around with one. I mean, is it a car that I'm I lust after? No, definitely not a car I lust after. But it is definitely a car that I think I could have some fun with. I mean, it's definitely it's literally, I think, one of those cars that I would love to take to the track because no one else does. And I would have some fun, and not only that, I would be probably able to keep up with many of the cars, the traditional cars that people use for tracking. So just one that I thought, I think the cars were made from like 2005 until 2007, or maybe it's 2004 until 2006. I believe it was only like a two or three year run on those cars. So yeah, definitely worth checking out. Very cool car. I think just severely underrated, but it has a lot of potential. So definitely check out that car. And then the next one that I would say is kind of an oldie. I don't think too many people would probably care for this car, but it was the first generation Ford Probe. It was basically the one that shared a lot of parts with Mazda, so it had a lot of the same parts as the Mazda 6. So yeah, it came with, you could get the Ford Probe GT, which came with a turbo, a 2.2 liter turbo, which I actually had a beater car. I had a 1990 GL, which was just the the basic 4-cylinder. I had manual transmission. That's what I learned manual transmission off of. But I mean, just for a daily beater, I actually didn't mind it. I think with some modifications, I mean, it had a turbo on it, so you could have some fun with that car. It's funny, randomly I'll come across, like many times what I do is while I'm on like Craigslist, particularly because the search engine's better on that one than Facebook Marketplace, but I'll randomly just type in like 1990 and come across. You don't see them too often, unfortunately. But yeah, it's one of those cars I would not mind picking up. Is the interior nice? It's basically what American cars were like when when they came out. I'm sorry, when they were, in the 90s. Yeah, kind of that stereotype, that negative stereotype of the interior design and quality. But overall, I think it's a pretty cool car. I would love to see what kind of potential those cars had. I'm not a high horsepower guy, but I think that car could be, if someone told me, you could get a reliable like 260 to maybe like 280 wheel horsepower out of it, I think that would be a very, very fun car. Funny thing too is that car gets when I had it, a lot of people actually thought it was a 240SX. That was before I got my 240SX, but yeah, it was pretty cool car for what it was. In fact, the legend has it that it was technically supposed to replace the Mustang. Is that true? I don't know. I think they were probably trying to break into a different segment. But yeah, pretty cool car. The second generation Probe, it was okay. Unfortunately, it had problems. I know the the 6-cylinder automatic transmissions didn't last very long. That's why you really don't see any of them anymore. But yeah, a lot of those cars shared a lot of similarities with their Mazda counterparts, because at that time Ford owned Mazda. So yeah, a cool car. You can get a 5-speed manual transmission, 2.2 liter turbo, and I mean, it's a pretty cheap car to maintain, and I can't imagine it would be too difficult to get some reliable horsepower out of it. It ran from 1989 until 1993. Yeah, it's probably 1993, and you could get them in the there was a GL, I think, an LX GT, and I remember they made a 6-cylinder version of it as well. But the one to have was the turbo. So that's another car. I'm curious if many of you guys remember that car. And then so now the third one that I would say that I think is pretty neat, and I will say I kind of wish I had looked for this car when it was a little more plentiful. It's the first generation Toyota MR2. And I don't know if many of you guys know, the second generation is definitely the most popular. It was in Fast and the Furious. Didn't have a major role in Fast and the Furious, but mid-engine car. The second generation definitely stole the show. It was a great car, But the first generation, it's a very tiny car. It ran from 1985 until 1989, 85 to 89, I believe. Can't remember if the MR2 second generation was. I think in first generation or second generation was 1991. So it might have run until 1990. But yeah, cool car in that it had a supercharger on it. So I believe it was like a 1.6 liter, and it had a supercharger on it. Didn't make a ton of horsepower, but for such a small car, I can only imagine that it's it's just a fun car. Mid-engine, rear-wheel drive, tiny. So yeah, if you're tall, I'm 6 foot tall, so I think I'd probably feel like a sardine in that car. But I think you could have a lot of fun with that car. One thing about them is they're definitely hard to find. You're going to find the naturally aspirated ones much more readily than the supercharged ones. I actually just saw a supercharged one on the road. It looked like it needed some work. I saw an older guy driving it, so I'm sure that obviously he knew what it was and he was having some fun with it. But it definitely needed work. But yeah, I will say you just don't see them very often. But pretty cool car for what it was. I think it would be a car that I would love to see at the track, because I'm sure it's a blast to drive. Now the next one that I will say, and I think a lot of people might laugh at me for this one, but I still think it would be a pretty neat. I actually considered it. It is the Toyota Camry, which I would assume was the third generation Camry, maybe the fourth generation. It was the 1992 to 1996 Camry. I remember that particularly. So neat thing about that Camry is they came with a 2.2 liter 4-cylinder and a very rare, you could actually get them in a 5-speed manual transmission. So you could get a coupe. They actually make coupes as well. and the coupes were obviously not as popular. But you could get a coupe, 4-cylinder, manual transmission. Excuse me. And you know what I think you can do is I think you can swap in a 3S GTE Toyota swap into it. I think it came in the Celica. That's like a Celica turbo engine, and they made where you could have it as front-wheel drive as well. So yeah, you could technically turn that car, that Camry, into a 2.2 liter turbo, and it's a very reliable engine, very, very good engine. It's that engine that people will swap into. I think they came in the Corollas as well. Well, I should say that I know that people would swap it into the 84 to 87 rear-wheel drive AE86 Corollas. The naturally aspirated version of it you could swap in, but yeah, pretty cool. I literally, that would be a project I think would be very, very fun, because I think it's something that you just don't see, and I don't think you would. It's a total sleeper. Like I said, I think I would definitely prefer the coupe version of that car, but even a four-door wouldn't be bad. But yeah, the Honda Accord definitely was more popular than that car was in a coupe form, as well as manual transmission. So yeah, that's definitely one of those cars. I mean, Toyota, they're reliable. I don't think there's much more I can say about that car. It's just one of those cars that I think most people, unfortunately, I think a lot of them went to the junkyard. The one, actually, I was very interested in one. A guy was selling for $750. I wasn't ready to pull. It wasn't running. And I remember it definitely needed body work, as far as it needed at least paint. And I remembered I unfortunately waited too long, and it sold before I could buy it. But that was one of those cars I was, even if I wasn't ready to start building it, I wanted to at least just buy it and store it. But that's a car that, like, those cars are the ones that I could say that really get me excited, because they're just something that the average, particularly if you talk to a car enthusiast, they're like, what? No way, I'm not interested in that car. That's lame. That to me is what makes it kind of fun. And then, so I'm looking at my list here. I mean, I've got a bunch of other cool cars. I think I was a little torn on which one. I was actually thinking about the Infiniti M30, which was basically an 80s Nissan car in Japan. And when Nissan was building their Infiniti brand in the United States, they brought this car over, and it unfortunately didn't sell well, because it has that 80s sharp edges look, and it only came in automatic transmission. It had I think 160 horsepower, so it was one of those things where not a lot of people really bought it. It was an 80s car trying to be rebranded as a 90s car, and it definitely did not sell well. And it definitely has some potential, but I mean, I honestly, because of its limited, because you would have to do a lot of work to convert it to manual transmission. So my number 5 pick is actually the Nissan Maxima, which I believe is going to be the 3rd generation Maxima, and this is the one that ran from 1989 until 1993. It's the one when the first production of the 190 horsepower 3-liter engine, the one that was winning awards left and right. Back in so you could get technically 2 Maximas back then, 2 engine choices. It had a 3-liter Nissan Maxima GXE, which was more of the luxury edition, which I honestly, I don't think I ever saw. I don't even think they offered it in a manual transmission. I want to say the GXE was basically like the luxury, comfortable car of that model. And the SE, was kind of like it was obviously their sport edition, and so it came with the same very similar 3-liter engine, but it actually had 190 horsepower. 190 horsepower back in '89 was unheard of. Honda Accord didn't even the Legend, Acura Legend, weren't really competing with that car. They couldn't compete with that kind of horsepower, and that engine was winning award after award. What was it? JD Power was constantly rating as like one of the best engines out there. So yeah, you could get the. So the neat thing about the Maxima was the SE model. They actually had a sticker. If you ever see one, look at the, I know particularly it had it on the driver's side. It might be on both sides. But the back door of the driver's side, you will see a sticker that reads 4DSC. And that stands for 4-door sports car, which was pretty cool. I think that was neat that Nissan did something like that. So, yeah, and so like one of the main differences, you could obviously get it in manual transmission. In fact, I don't even know if you could get an SE in automatic. Maybe you could. I know that the awesome part about it was manual transmission. It had like white faced gauges. Definitely a sporter. I love the wheels on it. Kind of shared the same design of the the Z31 300ZX wheels. That hatchback. Before the Z32 came out in 1990. So yeah, it was a pretty cool car. I mean, it's a shame that you just don't see them anymore. But yeah, it was awesome. I mean, that car had so much power compared to most cars out there. And it's just such a shame that you don't see them anymore. I would love to get one of those cars. You could get the Bose sound system in it. And I mean, it was a great car. That thing was just so like ahead of its time. It was a time that most car companies were not even able to come close to that horsepower and that that fun factor. So yeah, I mean, I think that car was actually very reliable. Honestly, I think the major problem with it was rust issues, like most other cars. So yeah, another car to consider. I'm hoping that some of these videos maybe will inspire some of you guys to buy these cars and keep them on the road. It's such a shame to see some of these cool cars that, of course, a lot of people don't appreciate. But there's definitely cult followings for, many of these cars. And it's such a shame to see that some of them are just going to die. And you'll never see them again. So, yeah, those are cars I would, if I ever get in a position, I'd love to try to restore some of these cars and at least keep them on the road in some capacity. Because unfortunately, a lot of these cars, the major problem with them is that most people just don't want to put the time and money into them because they're not going to get them back. So yeah, you could put the money into it and you probably won't get your money back. But I think for the cool factor, I think it'd be awesome if people did it. So yeah, so those are my 5. I don't know if you guys have any others. I will say this list was easier for me to make. I've got several other cars on this list. Some honorable mentions would be like the 1989 Acura Integra SE. They made an SE where it was a black with gray wheels. It had the same stock wheels as the other the LS, because I don't think they had the GS at the time, but they only made this. It was somewhat of a limited production car. I think it might have been available in 2 colors, but I know one particular is black with gold wheels, and it came in 5-speed manual transmission. I think it was making like 130 horsepower, which was pretty good back then. And yeah, definitely it was a limited production car. I didn't learn about this car until just about a year ago, and I actually saw one local for sale, and I tried to buy it, but it was sold before I could buy it. That's a pretty cool car. And then I got some of the Accord V6s with 6 speeds. But yeah, so just a few others that I came up with. If you have any other suggestions, I'd love to hear them. I'm always trying to recollect, some of these older cars to see which ones are still considered cool by today's standards. All right. Hope you're entertained. Bye-bye.